The word my son used was burden. He said it quietly, in a hushed, conspiratorial whisper to his wife, in my own kitchen. But it was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my 50 years of motherhood, of my entire life's work, turning to dust. Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to see you today. I'm Grandma Evelyn. My full name is Evelyn Mae Thompson. I'm 73 years old, and I'm from a little green corner of Vermont, the kind of place where the maple trees look like they're on fire in the autumn, and the silence in winter is a comfort, not a loneliness. This is a story I've never told a soul. Not the full, unvarnished truth of it. My daughter knows parts, but she doesn't know the depth of the wound. She doesn't know what it feels like to be reclassified in your own life, to go from being a mother to being a problem, from a matriarch to a piece of furniture that no one knows what to do with. To tell this story, it feels like admitting a great failure. But I've learned recently that the failure wasn't mine. The shame wasn't mine to carry. And it's time I finally put it down. Before I do, if you could be so kind as to like this video and subscribe to our channel, it would give this old heart the courage it needs. Your support reminds me that a single voice, telling a true story, can be the most powerful thing in the world. And today, I need to feel powerful. It all started not with a word, but with a promise. A promise made between me and my husband, George, under the bare wooden bones of this very house. Oh, my George. He wasn't a man who built houses. He built homes. He was a master carpenter, a man whose hands were a roadmap of his life's work, calloused, strong, and capable of the most incredible gentleness. He believed a house was more than wood and nails. It was the container for a family's life, for their laughter and tears, their memories and their dreams. And this house, the one I'm sitting in right now, was his masterpiece. He built it for us with his own 2 hands, on a beautiful piece of land our parents had helped us buy. I remember bringing him lemonade in the summer heat as he raised the walls. I remember our son David, just a little boy then, hammering scrap wood beside him, wanting to be just like his daddy. Every single floorboard, every window frame, holds a memory. It holds the echo of George's hammer, the scent of fresh-cut pine, the love of a man building a fortress for his family. On the day we moved in, with nothing but a mattress on the floor and a box of kitchen supplies, George took my hands in his. He looked around at the empty rooms and said, "Evelyn, this house is our promise. It's our foundation. It will always be here for our family. It will always be a safe harbor." And for 45 years, it was. This house was where David took his first steps. It's where I marked his height every year on the pantry doorframe, a ladder of pencil marks climbing towards manhood. It's where he scraped his knees, where he learned to ride a bike on the long driveway, where he brought home his first girlfriend, his face flushed with nervous pride. It was a house filled with the smell of my baking, the sound of George's laughter, and the endless, beautiful chaos of a happy family. George passed away 8 years ago, right here in this house, in his favorite armchair, looking out at the maple tree he had planted the year David was born. His loss was a wound that I knew would never fully heal. But the house he built for us became my comfort. It was like living inside his last hug. I could still feel him in the walls, in the solid floor beneath my feet. And I had my son, David. He was wonderful in the beginning, so attentive and kind, helping me navigate the lonely landscape of widowhood. The change began as it so often does when he brought someone new into our lives. Her name was Amelia. Amelia was a whirlwind. She was a city girl, a successful real estate agent from Boston, with a sharp mind, a sharper wardrobe, and a smile that could sell sand in the desert. She was ambitious, polished, and everything my quiet country life was not. At first I was just so happy for David. He was smitten, completely captivated by her energy and her sophistication. When he brought her home to meet me, she walked into my cozy, lived-in house, and her eyes began to scan. It wasn't the look of a guest. It was the look of an appraiser. "Oh, Evelyn, this place has such incredible bones," she said, her voice bright and professional. "A real classic. It's a bit of a time capsule, isn't it?" It wasn't a compliment. It was a diagnosis. My home, my life's sanctuary, was a time capsule to her. A project. An asset. She was polite, of course. Deferential even. She complimented my garden. She raved about my apple pie. But there was a constant, low-level hum of assessment about her. She'd run her hand along the solid oak banister George had hand-carved and say, "You just don't see craftsmanship like this anymore. This would cost a fortune to replicate." She wasn't admiring the love. She was calculating the cost. And slowly, so slowly, I barely noticed it at first, she began to change my son. He started seeing this house not as his home, but through her eyes, as an investment. The conversations shifted. It was no longer, "Remember when we built the tray house in the old oak, Mom?" It was, "You know, Mom, this land alone must be worth a fortune now." Amelia would come over on weekends, and she wouldn't be talking to me. She would be talking the house. "A little open-plan living here would do wonders," she'd say, gesturing vaguely at the wall between my kitchen and living room. "Tear this down, put in a huge island. You could really update the whole feel, increase the resale value tremendously." She wasn't just redecorating. She was erasing. She was mentally tearing down the walls that held 50 years of my memories. She was erasing George. I tried to gently push back once. "Oh, but George built that wall specifically," I said with a soft smile. "He said a kitchen should be a kitchen, a place for messes and smells, and the living room should be for peace and quiet." Amelia gave me a patient, slightly pitying look. The kind you'd give a sweet but hopelessly outdated old aunt. "Of course," she said. "But tastes change, Evelyn. You have to modernize to really unlock the equity." "You unlock the equity." The phrase sent a chill down my spine. This house wasn't a vault to be unlocked. It was a heart. It was a living, breathing thing. But to them, it was just a number on a balance sheet. And I, by extension, was the person living in the middle of their biggest asset. When they got engaged, they made it clear they wanted to be married right here, in the backyard, under the shade of the big maple tree. I was touched at first. I thought it was about honoring his father, his childhood. But I quickly realized it was about laying claim to the property. It was a performance for their friends, a way of showing everyone the beautiful, vintage estate that would, one day, be theirs. The assumption was always there, unspoken, but hanging in the air like a thick fog. When the house is ours, they would talk about their future plans in front of me, as if I were already a ghost. "We'll definitely need to renovate the master bathroom when we move in," Amelia would say to David, right in front of me. "A nice big walk-in shower. We can take out that old clawfoot tub by just..." That old clawfoot tub was the tub I had bathed my son in. The tub George and I had picked out together at an antique fair. But to her, it was just an obstacle to her modern aesthetic. My son, my David, would just nod along, a placid smile on his face. He was so eager to please her, so desperate to prove he belonged in her fast-paced, ambitious world, that he was willing to bulldoze his own history. He was willing to stand by and watch her plan the desecration of his father's legacy, and of my life. I was no longer the matriarch of the family, the keeper of the memories. I was the live-in caretaker of their future inheritance. I was a tenant in my own home. And I was beginning to suspect my lease was about to run out. The wedding planning became the stage for their quiet, creeping takeover. It wasn't one big, dramatic confrontation. It was a war of 1,000 tiny aggressions, of assumptions so deeply embedded they felt like facts. My home, the house George built, was no longer my own. It became their event space. Amelia would show up with caterers and florists, walking them through my rooms with the proprietary air of a homeowner. She didn't ask for permission. She issued decrees. "We'll move the piano out of the living room." "Of course," she announced one afternoon, waving a dismissive hand at the beautiful upright piano George had bought me for our 25th anniversary. "It's taking up valuable floor space for the cocktail tables." I felt a jolt of panic. Move the piano. But where would it go? She gave me that patient smile again, the one that made my blood run cold. "Into storage, probably, just for the wedding weekend. It's just not the right vibe for the event we're creating. The right vibe. My life, the collection of objects I had cherished for half a century, was now subject to her aesthetic approval. David was standing right there. He saw the stricken look on my face. He knew what that piano meant to me. It was where I'd taught him his first clumsy chords. It was where his father and I would sit on Sunday afternoons, him humming off key while I played old hymns. It was a repository of joy. "Amelia, honey," he started, his voice hesitant. "The piano is kind of a fixture." "Darling," she said, cutting him off without even looking at him, her eyes still scanning the room. "It's either the piano or a proper bar setup. We can't have both. The guests need a place to mingle." And just like that, the debate was over. A proper bar was more important than my memories. David, my son, just gave a weak nod. He had become a master of the weak nod. It was his signature move in the face of her relentless ambition. Each nod was a small betrayal, a quiet surrender of his own history, of our history. I started to feel like a ghost in my own house. I would come downstairs in the morning to find swatches of fabric draped over my armchair, or binders filled with contracts and invoices spread across my dining room table. They were planning their future in the heart of my present, and they didn't even see the irony. Or, I suspect, they just didn't care. The word burden hadn't been spoken yet, but I could feel it. I could feel it in the way Amelia would sigh dramatically when I couldn't remember the name of the caterer she'd mentioned. I could feel it in the way David would look at me with a strained, tired patience when I'd ask a question about the wedding schedule. I was an extra piece of furniture they had to constantly shuffle around to make room for their grand plans. Their friends would come over to see the venue, and I would be introduced not as the mother of the groom, but as a sort of charming, rustic docent. "And this is David's mother, Evelyn," Amelia would say, her arm draped possessively through David's. "She lives here, for now." For now. The two words were always delivered with a bright, tinkling laugh, as if it were a joke. But it wasn't. It was a promise. A threat. It was a reminder to everyone, including me, that my time here was limited, that I was living on borrowed time in my own home. My friends saw it. My neighbor, Margaret, who had known George and me for 40 years, came over for tea one afternoon and found me nearly in tears after Amelia had insisted on replacing all my beloved mismatched garden pots with uniform, slate-gray planters for a more cohesive visual for the wedding photo. "Evelyn," Margaret said, taking my hand in her own weathered one, "you can't let them do this. This is your home, George's home. You have to say something." "Oh, Maggie, what can I say?" I whispered, the shame hot in my cheeks. "If I protest, I'm the difficult mother-in-law. I'm the villain who is trying to ruin their perfect day. David is so happy. I don't want to make waves." "Nelisi, happiness shouldn't require you to drown, Evelyn," she said, her words so sharp and true they made me wince. But I was too afraid. I had lost my George, and I was terrified of losing my son, too. So I swallowed my pride. I bit my tongue until it bled. I allowed them to slowly, systematically, erase my life from the walls around me. I told myself it was just for the wedding. I told myself that once the party was over, my life would return to normal. Gosh, I was a fool. The wedding wasn't the end of their plans. It was the beginning. The real shift, the moment the subtext became text, happened about a month before the wedding. I had a fall. It wasn't a bad one. I was out in the garden, tripped over a loose stone, and twisted my ankle. The doctor said it was a mild sprain, and that I needed to stay off it for a week or two. For David and Amelia, this wasn't a cause for concern. It was an opportunity. They came over that evening, their faces etched with a deep, performative worry. Amelia was carrying a stack of glossy brochures. Brochures for assisted living facilities. "Mom," David said, his voice oozing with a practiced sincerity, "we were so worried about you. We can't have you living here all alone anymore. What if something worse had happened? What if you had been on the floor for hours?" "Amelia jumped in, placing the brochures on the coffee table beside my propped-up foot. "We've been doing some research, Evelyn," she said, her voice soft and reasonable. "And we found some absolutely stunning places. Look at this one. It's more like a resort. They have a pool and a dining room and organized activities. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. No more stairs, no more yard work, no more risk." I stared at the pictures of smiling, silver-haired seniors playing shuffleboard. I looked at the floor plans for the small, sterile, one-bedroom apartments. They wanted to move me into a box. A safe, clean, manageable box, so that they could have my house. The rage that filled me was so potent, so absolute, that I couldn't even speak. My house, this fortress George had built for me, was now being painted as a death trap. My independence was being reframed as a risk. "I am not moving," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. David's face tightened. The mask of concern slipped, revealing the deep-seated frustration underneath. "Mom, be reasonable. You're not getting any younger. This house is too much for you. The upkeep, the stairs, it's a burden." There it was. The word. Not spoken directly at me, but at the life I was living. The life that was standing in the way of their plans. "This house is not a burden," I said, my voice gaining strength. "It is my home. It is my husband's legacy. And I will live here until the day I die. This is not up for discussion." Amelia saw she was losing, so she changed tactics. She put on her sweet, placating smile. "Of course, Evelyn. Of course. We're not going to force you to do anything. We're just exploring options. For the future, we just want you to be safe." But the seed was planted. The word, burden, was now out there, hanging in the air. And in the weeks that followed, they watered it every single day. Every conversation was now peppered with little comments designed to undermine my confidence, to make me feel old and incapable. "Are you sure you should be climbing that stepladder to dust the shelves, Mom? Let me get David to do that. Don't worry about cooking for us, Evelyn. We'll just order something in. It's too much for you. The gardens are looking a little overgrown, Mom. Maybe we should hire a service to take care of it all. It's a lot to manage." They weren't being helpful. They were being insidious. They were building a narrative, brick by brick, that I was a frail, incompetent old woman who couldn't be trusted to live on her own. They were building their case. And the wedding, I realized with a dawning horror, was going to be their star witness. They would show all their friends and family this big, beautiful, rambling house, and then sigh about how it was all just too much for poor old Evelyn to handle. They were laying the groundwork for the day they would finally, gently, and lovingly push me out. Was it all my fault? I tortured myself with the question. Had I been too quiet? Too accommodating? Had my grief over George made me weak, made me an easy target? Had I raised a son who saw love not as a bond, but as an opportunity? The questions were a poison, and I drank them every night. The final, shattering blow came the week before the wedding. It was the moment that turned the cold knot of anger in my stomach into a plan. I was upstairs in my bedroom, resting my ankle, when I heard them come into the house. They didn't know I was home. They thought I was at my weekly book club meeting. I heard them in the kitchen, their voices low and conspiratorial. I sat at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, and I listened. "Did you talk to her about the bathroom renovations again?" Amelia asked, her voice sharp and impatient. "I tried," David sighed. And the sound of that sigh, the weary, long-suffering sound of it, broke my heart all over again. "She's not budging. She keeps talking about Dad, about how he picked out the tiles. Is exhausting." Amelia's voice was incredulous. "David, it's a pink bathroom. Pink and avocado green. It's a horror show. We can't live with a bathroom like that. And what about the finances? Has she even told you what her plans are? How are we supposed to plan our lives when we're just waiting for her to, you know?" Hey. The unspoken words hung in the air. Waiting for her to die. And David was quiet for a long moment, and then he said the words. the words that would become the catalyst for everything that came next. "I know," he said, his voice a low, defeated whisper. "I know. But what can I do? She's my mother. She's a burden. A sweet, well-meaning, exhausting burden. We just have to be patient. Once the house is ours, we can do whatever we want. We just have to wait." A burden. He had finally said it. He had given a name to what I had become in his life. I was not his mother. I was not the woman who had raised him, loved him, and sacrificed for him. I was a burden, an obstacle, a temporary problem that stood between him and the life he really wanted. I didn't make a sound. I just sat there on the top step, the shadows of the hallway wrapped around me like a shroud, and I felt something in me die. The soft, forgiving, endlessly loving mother he had always known died in that moment. And in her place, a different woman was born. A woman who had been pushed too far. A woman who had just heard her own son pronounce her irrelevant. A woman who was now, finally, ready to make waves. I stood up, my sprained ankle protesting, but I didn't feel the pain. My body was numb, but my mind was on fire. I walked back into my bedroom, not with the shuffle of an old woman, but with the steady, silent tread of a general about to go to war. He thought he just had to wait. He thought the house was his. Oh, my sweet, foolish boy. He had no idea. The house wasn't his. The house was mine. And I was about to remind him of that fact in a way he would never, ever forget. The word burden echoed in the silent rooms of my house for the rest of that week. It was a poison that seeped into the floorboards George had laid, into the wallpaper I had chosen, into the very air I breathed. Every time I looked at a photograph of my smiling son, the word would superimpose itself over his face. Burden.it. In. Parananiu. Anatgal. But the poison didn't kill me. It did something else. It burned away the fog of grief and fear, and a lifetime of putting my own needs last. The pain was immense, a great, gaping wound in my soul. But inside that wound, something new and hard and clear began to grow. It was the bedrock of a decision. He thought this house was his. He and his ambitious fiancée were just waiting, patiently, for me to vacate the premises, one way or another, so they could unlock the equity and live their modern, unburdened lives. They'd already mentally renovated it, redecorated it, and erased me from it. They had made me a ghost in my own home. And in that moment of terrible clarity, I knew what I had to do. I was not a ghost. I was the owner. I was the matriarch. And I was about to remind them, and myself, of what that truly meant. My plan was not a loud, angry confrontation. Oh, no. I had learned from them. Their cruelty was quiet, delivered with a smile. My revenge would be the same. It would be a quiet, simple, and absolutely devastating act of self-reclamation. It would be a business transaction. Since that's what this house had become to them, that's how I would treat it. The day after I overheard their conversation, I made a phone call. I didn't call a family lawyer. I didn't call a therapist. I called a real estate agent. Not Amelia. God, no. I called her biggest competitor. A sharp, savvy woman named Carol, whose face I had seen on for sale signs all over town, always with a big, red sold banner slapped across them. "Carol," I said when she answered the phone, her voice brisk and professional. "My name is Evelyn Thompson. I live in the old carpenter-built house on Maple Hill, and I'd like to sell it." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. She knew the house. Everyone knew the house. It was a local landmark. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice full of a sudden intense interest. "Are you serious?" "Us a heart attack?" I said, the phrase tasting like irony in my mouth. "And I want to sell it fast. And I want to sell it quietly. Off-market. I have a feeling you might know just the right kind of buyer who would appreciate a property like this and would be willing to move very, very quickly." "I think I might," Carol said, her voice practically purring. "When can I come see it?" For the next few days, while David and Amelia were blissfully finalizing the details of their wedding, their grand party to lay claim to their inheritance, I was having secret meetings. Carol came over, her eyes wide with a professional's appreciation for the craftsmanship, the land, the sheer potential. She saw what Amelia saw, but without the entitled condescension. She saw a gold mine. We made a plan. Quiet sale. A cash offer from a developer she knew who had been trying to get his hands on a piece of Maple Hill property for years. The price he offered was staggering. It was a number that represented a lifetime of freedom. A number that would have made George's jaw drop. The developer agreed to my terms. And my terms were very, very specific. He could have the house, but I retained lifetime rights to the big maple tree in the backyard, the one George had planted for David. It could never be cut down. And the closing date? The closing date was to be the Monday morning after the wedding. The paperwork was drawn up with breathtaking speed. It was all handled through Carol. I signed the papers in her office on the Thursday before the wedding. The house was no longer mine. The decision was made. The die was cast. And with every signature, I felt a piece of the crushing weight on my chest lift. I wasn't a burden. I was a free woman. I was a wealthy woman. The wedding day arrived. It was a beautiful, sunny Saturday. The backyard had been transformed by an army of florists and caterers into something from a magazine. It was stunning, I had to admit. But it wasn't my home anymore. It was a movie set. And I was just playing a part. I played it perfectly. I was the sweet, slightly frail, doting mother of the groom. I wore a lovely new dress. I smiled at the guests. I allowed Amelia to steer me around like a precious, fragile doll. "Now, Evelyn, you just sit here in the shade," she'd say, her voice dripping with false concern. "We don't want you overdoing it on your ankle." I would just smile and say, "Thank you, dear. You're so thoughtful." I watched my son get married under the branches of the tree his father had planted for him. He looked handsome. He looked happy. And I felt a profound, heartbreaking distance from him. He was a stranger to me now, a man who had called me a burden, and he was standing on ground that he thought was his, ground that I had already sold out from under his feet. The reception was loud and lavish. There were speeches. Seraphina's father, a loud, pompous man, stood up and made a toast. "To David and Amelia," he boomed, raising his champagne glass. "And to this incredible, beautiful home they will one day fill with their own children, a testament to family, to legacy, and to a bright future." All the guests cheered. David and Amelia beamed. They looked at each other with a look of pure, triumphant ownership. They thought everyone was celebrating their marriage. But I knew what they were really celebrating. They were celebrating their acquisition. My moment came near the end of the evening. It was time for the mother-son dance. David walked over to me, his smile perfect, and held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Mom?" he asked, for the benefit of the 100 pairs of eyes watching us. "Of course, darling," I said. He led me to the dance floor. The band began to play a slow, sentimental song. He put his arm around my waist, and we began to sway back and forth. This was supposed to be a tender, emotional moment. A mother letting her son go. But for me, it was the final scene of a tragedy. As we danced, he leaned in and whispered in my ear, his voice full of a smug, confident affection. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for the house, for the future. Amelia and I are so grateful. We'll take good care of it, and of you, I promise." And that was it. That was the final twist of the knife. He was thanking me for the house he thought I was going to die in. He was promising to take care of the burden. The fight back was not in a shout. It was in a whisper. I leaned into him, my mouth close to his ear, my voice as soft and sweet as poison. "Oh, David," I whispered, as we continued to sway to the music. "I'm so glad you're grateful, because I have a wedding gift for you." He smiled. "Mom, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," I interrupted, my voice still a gentle murmur. "My gift to you and Amelia is a piece of advice. And my advice is that you should pack your bags as soon as you get back from your honeymoon. Because this house, the one you're so grateful for, has been sold." He stopped dancing. He went completely still in the middle of the dance floor. "What?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "What did you say?" "I sold the house, dear," I repeated, pulling back to look him in the eye. I gave him a bright, brilliant smile. "The closing is on Monday morning at 9. I get a certified check for more money than you and your father ever dreamed of. And the new owners, a lovely development company, will be taking possession on Tuesday. They were very clear about wanting the property vacated immediately." I watched his face. I watched the confident, happy groom dissolve. I watched the color drain away, leaving a mask of pure, horrified disbelief. The blood rushed back in a panicked, blotchy red. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. But you can't," he finally stammered. This is our house. My house." "No, David," I said, and my voice was no longer a whisper. It was clear and strong and echoed with the power of a woman who had finally found her own footing. "This was my house, and your father's, and you, my son, made it very clear that both it and I were a burden to you. So I have done you a kindness. I have lifted that burden from your shoulders, permanently." I let go of his hand. I took a step back, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the dance floor, the music still playing, 100 guests staring at the groom who looked like he had just been struck by lightning. "You're free, David," I said, my voice ringing with a terrible, liberating clarity. "You're finally, truly, unburdened." And with that, I turned. I walked off the dance floor, through the crowd of stunned, silent guests. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had taken back my house. I had taken back my life. And most importantly, I had taken back my own name. I was not a burden. I was Evelyn Thompson, and I was the owner of my own damn life. The rest of the wedding reception was a blur of chaos that I watched from a calm, quiet distance. The music ground to a halt. I saw Amelia rush to David's side, her face a storm cloud of confusion and fury. I saw him talking to her, his hands gesturing wildly. I saw her perfect, smiling bride mask crumble into a snarl of disbelief and rage. The party was over. Their beautiful curated performance had been spectacularly, publicly, and permanently shut down. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. That was their mess to clean up. I simply found my purse, said a quiet goodbye to my neighbor Margaret, who was looking at me with a newfound expression of awe and respect, and I walked out of my old home for the last time as its owner. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt light. The weight of that house, the weight of their expectations, the crushing weight of being a burden. It had all been lifted. I got in my car and drove to a lovely hotel I had booked for myself in the city, and I slept for 10 straight hours, a deep, dreamless, and profoundly peaceful sleep. The closing on Monday morning was a simple, anticlimactic affair. I signed the last of the papers, and a woman handed me a certified check with so many zeros on it, it looked like a telephone number. I deposited it into a new bank account that had only one name on it, mine. The phone calls started that afternoon. Dozens of them. First from David, then from Amelia. They left frantic, pleading, and then angry, demanding voicemails. "Mom, call me back. We need to talk about this. You don't understand what you've done." David's voice was a panicked squeak. "Evelyn, this is Amelia. I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but you have a legal and moral obligation to David. That house is his birthright. Our lawyers will be in touch." Her voice was like ice. I didn't answer. I didn't listen to the messages more than once. Their panic was a distant storm that could no longer touch me. A birthright? No, Gotti. My son's birthright was the love and sacrifice of 2 parents who worked their fingers to the bone to give him a good life. He had squandered that. The house was just wood and nails. They did try to fight it. Their lawyers sent threatening letters. But there was nothing they could do. The house had been in my name alone since George passed away. It was my property to sell, and I had sold it. Their legal threats dissolved into a pathetic, angry silence. The last I heard, they had to move into a small, rented apartment in the city, a far cry from the grand estate on Maple Hill they had been planning their lives around. Their marriage, which was built on a foundation of future assets and not much else, apparently struggled under the weight of their disappointment. I don't know if they made it. And to be honest, I found I didn't care. Their happiness was no longer my responsibility. I took the money from the sale of the house, and I started to live. Really live, for the first time in my life. I bought a small, beautiful condo in a building with a pool and a doorman. One of those resorts Amelia had been trying to put me in. But this one was mine, on my own terms. I traveled. I went to Italy and saw the art I had only ever read about in books. I went on a cruise to Alaska and saw glaciers calve into the sea. I took classes. I learned pottery. I started a book club. I reconnected with old friends. I filled my life not with the echoes of the past, but with the joy of the present. I built a new life, a life that was not defined by being George's widow or David's mother, but by being Evelyn. And my son? He tried to reach out about a year later. I received a letter, a long, rambling, self-pitying letter about how I had betrayed him, how I had been selfish. Buried at the very end of it was a single, lukewarm sentence. I suppose I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like a burden. Ifdot. That one little word told me everything I needed to know. He still didn't get it. He wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was sorry for the consequences that had befallen him. He hadn't learned a lesson about gratitude or respect. He had only learned that his inheritance wasn't as secure as he thought. I never wrote back. The lesson in all of this, the one that I had to learn at the ripe old age of 71, is a simple one. You can give your children your life, your love, your labor, your every waking thought, but you cannot give them your soul. You must keep a little piece of yourself for yourself. The moment you allow someone, even your own child, to define your worth, you have given them the power to destroy you. A home is not an inheritance. A mother is not a caretaker for her children's future. She is the architect of her own. And a burden? A burden is something you are forced to carry. My life, my love, my home, those were gifts I had freely given. And when a gift is disrespected, when it is treated as a mere expectation, you have every right in the world to take it back. So, if you are out there and you are feeling taken for granted, if you are being made to feel like an obstacle in your own life, please listen to this old woman. You are not a supporting character in your children's story. You are the star of your own. It is never, ever too late to rewrite the script, to change the ending, and to walk off into a sunset of your own making. Thank you for letting me share this story with you. Putting it into words has been a final, liberating act. If you found a little piece of your own power in my story, I would be so honored if you would like this video and subscribe to our channel. And please don't forget to ring that notification bell so we can share more stories together. The comments are a place for community, and I would love for you to share your own stories of reclaiming your life. We are all stronger when we know we are not alone. Love you all. This is Grandma Evelyn, and I'll see you in the next story.